Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Padavijikacharya, Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, Jai. Jai Om Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Padavijikacharya, Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur, Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, the Samaveta Bhaktavrinda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirihet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 14th day of February 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Canto 5, the creative impetus. Chapter 13, further talks between King Rahugana and Jadabharata. Text number 10. Karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhir vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpanti atatam tato anye karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan chatatang tatonye karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan chatatang tatonye karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan chatatang tatonye karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan chatatong karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha pratikritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan natatang tatonye karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvan tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan tatatang. Dhammaraj, you want to try it? No? Okay, go ahead. Karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimanaha tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano balad vilumpan tatatang. Zoomland.
Kari shachit kudrarasan vichinvans
Karhi smachit chudrarasan vichinvans
tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimana
tanmakshikabhi vyatito vimana
tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano
tatrati kritchat pratilabdhamano
balad vilumpanti athotam tatonai
balad vilumpyan tatatong yatorne. Karhi smachit, sometimes. Chudra, very insignificant. Rasan, sexual enjoyment. Vichinvan, searching for. Tat, of those women. Makshikabihi, by honeybees, or the husbands or family members. Vyatitaha, very much aggrieved. vimanaha, insulted, tatra, in that, ati, very much, kritrat, with difficulty because of spending money, pratilabdhamanaha, obtaining sexual enjoyment, balat, by force, vilumpanti, kidnapped, ata, thereafter, tam, the object of sense enjoyment, the woman, tataha, from him, anye, another debauchee. Translation. So this is Judd Bart speaking to King Mahugana. Sometimes, in order to have a little insignificant sex enjoyment, one searches after debauched women. In this attempt, one is insulted and chastised by the women's kinsmen. This is like going to take honey from a beehive and being attacked by the bees. Sometimes, after spending lots of money, one may acquire another woman for some extra sense enjoyment. Unfortunately, the object of sense enjoyment, the woman, is taken away or kidnapped by another debauchee. Purport. In a great forest, honeycombs are very important. People often go there to collect honey from the combs, and sometimes the bees attack and punish them. In human society, those who are not Krishna conscious remain in the forest of material life simply for the honey of sex life. Such debauchees are not at all satisfied with one wife. They want many women. Day after day, with great difficulty, they try to secure such women, and sometimes, while trying to taste this kind of honey, one is attacked by a woman's kinsman and chastised very heavily. By bribing others, one may secure another woman for enjoyment, yet another debauchee may kidnap her or offer her something better. This woman hunting is going on in the forest of the material world, sometimes legally and sometimes illegally. Consequently, in this Krishna consciousness movement, the devotees are forbidden to have illicit sex. Thus, they avoid so many difficulties. One should remain satisfied with one woman being duly married. One can satisfy one's lusty desires with his wife without creating disturbances in society and being punished for doing so. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, when I read this verse in purport, and I realized what day it was, I realized Krishna has a real sense of humor, isn't it? So, Valentine's Day. So, this is more description of this forest of enjoyment called the material world. And the material world doesn't have to be a forest of enjoyment. It depends on the mentality of those who are in it. We're also in the material world, physically at least. And we don't have to be struggling to find some insignificant sense enjoyment and then be disappointed, and then there's the disease, and then there's the competitor and the broken heart and all of this stuff going on, right? All because of this uncontrolled sex desire. And in this age especially, the Kali Yuga, more and more of the rules and regulations that are meant to govern human life are disregarded or distorted or observed in name only. And so it's just it really is a jungle in which there's a lot of suffering and distress, and we're going to read more about this as time goes on. Whenever we come across verses like this in the Bhagavatam, I always think of two verses, one from Kapila Dev and another spoken by Krishna in the 11th canto, practically identical. Some of you may know this verse, brahmacharis. I think there's a whole list of brahmachari verses you can memorize. Natatasa bhavein moho bandhaschanya prasangata yoshit sangajita pangso yata tat sangitaha. This is Kapila Dev speaking. He says there's no more greater illusion, natatasa bhavein moho, or more bondage that accrues to the conditioned soul than attachment to women or association with those who are too much attached to women. That caveat is always there, because attachment is catching, just like a disease. If you're associating with devotees, you catch a good disease of attachment to Krishna. But generally speaking, people get attached to all kinds of different things in the material world, leading, which is the opposite sex. And in this way, you stay bound up to a life of suffering. So here he says, no greater illusion or bondage. And in the 11th canto, he has the same verse, but he changes one verse. Natadasa bhaven klesho bandhastanya pasangata. Krishna in the 11th canto, he says there's no greater source of misery or bondage. Misery or illusion. Yeah, misery or bondage. Bondage is common for both verses. Then attachment to women, or those two are attached to women. So this is the known as the Adi Ras. The Adi Ras. This is the original rasa in the spiritual world. And the others derive from it, kind of. But it's the original rasa. And we know that it's the highest form of worship of Krishna. Because this world is a perfect reflection of the spiritual world. That wonderful verses at the beginning of the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Urdvamulam adakshakam ashwatam prahamavriram. This word ashwata is probably translated as a banyan tree. Banyan tree, I don't know if you've ever seen one personally, but they can be very, very entangling, and they just grow. They put out these branches. From the branches come other roots, and then they go and keep growing. So it can almost be like a whole acre of tree, one tree. So that's why he uses that, because this material world is infinitely entangling. There's unlimited desires you can have, combinations of the modes of nature. We can continue within it for thousands and millions of years in different incarnations. And you think you're making progress by going from one branch to another. Krishna explains in the 15th chapter. I think it's the twigs are the object of the senses, and the branches, the different Vedas also, the material part of the Vedas. You think you're making progress. Oh, I'm going to heaven. Now I've got it made. I'm on a very nice branch. But you actually eventually have to leave that branch and come back into the maelstrom of this material world. So here the Jada Bharat is giving a very honest and realistic description of what this material world is, when we simply see it as a place for our own enjoyment. The whole thing keys on our own mentality as we live in this material world, because everything depends on consciousness. It all starts with your consciousness. If you're completely ignorant, and the idea is that through knowledge, one can become enlightened and do those things which help you escape from this forest of enjoyment. But if you're in ignorance, then you're undoubtedly going to make mistakes. You're thinking you're making progress by not being a debauchee. But all you're doing is maybe moving up into the mode of higher passion, where you just have your wife. There's no controls, it's under, but at least you have one wife and you have wife and children, But that's not liberation. That's not really progress, because ultimately you have to leave that situation. And if you have no assets, spiritual assets of attraction for Krishna, advancement of Krishna consciousness, you're again thrown into this world. And you could easily come down by association into the modes of ignorance, and then commit extreme sin, and then lose the human form of life. This is the situation we're actually in as spirit souls. So the essence of the whole thing, the real way out, is association with someone who is in the world but not of the world. In other words, a great sadhu. Someone who may be in this world but is not bound by these material desires. Rather, such sadhus are sent, or they come voluntarily, in order to try to save us, who are other souls who are suffering. And that's where we have this great opportunity, because Srila Prabhupada came out of his great mercy, compassion, austerity, to give us this knowledge and the means of realizing the knowledge. That has to be there also. And he gave us the Hare Krishna mantra and the other aspects of devotional service, and he gave us his books, and he gave us unlimited lectures and letters, and as much as he could pour out in those 12 years when he was with us. preaching in the West and all over the world. So this fifth canto is part of that manifestation. And it's just as important. Prabhupada was at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, first purport, he talks about how, because in India, there's so many reciters of the Bhagavatam, and it becomes a business. Anything can become corrupted by material desire. Oh, I've got status now, I'm a yogi. I'll go to the West, I'll make so much money, and have and then you become more corrupted. So even in India, forget about the West. Prabhupada would rail against these Bhagavat reciters, professional Bhagavat reciters. We're chanting our shlokas, but you can imagine, they cultivate, very, very nice, and it's always the 10th canto, and it's always the rasa dance, because people can relate to that. Oh yeah, I can really get into that part. Complete ignorance of what that represents as the highest jewel of selfless devotional service to Krishna. And that kind of exploitation of the Adi Ras, of the gopis and Krishna, was the source of all of these upper sampradayas that came after Lord Chaitanya left. There's a big gap in time between 1534 and 1890s or 1880s, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur came and revived everything. And there were great devotees there, don't get me wrong. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Narottam Das Thakur, and they came after. But there were also the arisal or the manifestation of these upper sampradayas. Prabhupada would call it sahajiyas. Sahajiya means easy. It's easy. What are you going through all of these austerities for and the Shastra? Just chant and dance, and and think of the rasa dance. And you can dress up as gopis, and I'll dress up as Krishna. And, that's extremely dangerous. And because it's a universal principle in the material world, people are ignorant, and so they're vulnerable to be misguided and to be cheated. You see, and people say, "Oh, this is very attractive, and it's Krishna," and we're chanting Hare Krishna. But if you're not understanding this aspect of the philosophy of how one has to control the lower self, you can't mix it. If you try to mix in debauchery with Krishna consciousness, you're cheated. You don't go back to Godhead. You become degraded. You can even lose this human form of life. Now, chanting Krishna's name in any context is auspicious. So you may get an opportunity to associate with a devotee in your next life, but you may not be in a human body. Sometimes we see, I remember there was these stories about animals, especially in New Vrindavan in the old days. They had a dog who would come to Mangalartik. He wouldn't go in the temple, wouldn't come in the temple, but when the Mangalartik, when the conch blew, they'd see his head come over the window, and he'd stay until the blowing the conch, and he'd leave. And he was a devotee, a fallen devotee. And there was and I don't know if it was that one who was also paying into obeisances and things like that. But it's tragic to waste this human form of life. But there's always a benefit if you have some devotional service. But we want to try to do it right. The pleasure. Okay, we're after pleasure. We should think of Lord Rishabdev. Lord Rishabdev is the source of all this, right? He's the ultimate father of Jad Bharat. So he's an incarnation of Krishna. So he gives his famous verse, and it's very pertinent to this subject matter. Nayam deho deha bhajang niloke kashtan kaman arate vidbhujanghe tapo divyam putrakayena sattvam shuddhye jismam brahma saukyam tvanantam. Directly deals with this subject. He's speaking to his 100 sons. He's about to take sannyas, an unusual sannyas. He becomes an avaduta. It's another story. But here his 100 sons, amongst whom is Bharat, who is the original Bharat from the Jada Bharat, and he becomes a leader. He's the leader of all the 100 sons. So what does he say there? He says, those who are in the human form, sons, which includes you, includes us, Nayam deho deha bhajan niloke kashtan kaman should not work very hard. Kashta means struggling very hard, the struggle for existence. For what? For the pleasures that even the hogs can enjoy. Prabhupada would use the hogs. You know, they're very eager to have sex life. There's no restrictions for them. Mother, wife, sister, daughter, doesn't make any difference to them. You know. So they're in hog heaven for a while, right? They eat anything. They'll have sex with anything. So he said that's a tragic loss of the value of human life. So don't act like that. What's the alternative? Tabo divyam putraka. O sons, you must learn to perform austerities, but not any austerities. It all depends on your motive, on why you're performing austerities. Hiranyakashipu performed austerities to become immortal, become so powerful he could conquer the universe. You know, right? That's demonic. That's not bhakti. No, divyam, tapo divyam. That means divine penances. How are we going to learn what they are? From Guru Sadhu Shastra, from the higher authorities. So there are austerities in Krishna consciousness. We don't have to go to a mountain somewhere and stand on our tippy toes for 10,000 years, as Hiranyakashipu did. That's not necessary, and it's not healthy. No, we have to perform the austerity of chanting Hare Krishna. 16 rounds a day on beads. And then within that austerity, there's how you're chanting. Where's your mind? What is your mood? The 10 offenses have to be avoided. That's not, none of that is sense gratification. That is austerity. 4 regular principles. Illicit sex, that's what's being dealt with here. Sex is allowed within marriage. Now Prabhupada says at the end of the purport you can satisfy your lusty desires, but even that, when it comes down to it, is not really proper in family life. It's for procreation, and there's a whole, and even there's a whole samskar to perform, Garbhadan samskar, which for Prabhupada, I don't know if it's the whole samskar of chanting 50 rounds of Hare Krishna a day before having sex. I always wondered, as soon as I heard that, well, after 50 rounds, do you still want to have sex? But anyway, I never did have to perform that austerity, that particular penance. But the idea, in every sphere of life, there is a right way to do it, there's a Krishna conscious way to do it, and there's a way where you can get deeper and deeper into Maya. So this is, then no meat eating. Now, that wasn't an austerity for me. I was already a vegetarian. But I think that's practically one of the easiest one if you're serious. There's prasadam, there's the samosas, and there's pakoras, and there's... So if you really think about it, and you realize how damaging it is, how harmful that is, not on the level of just ethics, on your own health, on the planet, the cost, every level, it's horrible, and yet people are addicted to that. So no meeting, no intoxication. Of course, that was a difficult one for many devotees to give up, at first. But that's obviously important because you're dealing with your consciousness. You want to have it as clear as possible, and this artificial changing of your mind, of your brain, really, is not going to help you, because eventually you come off of it. Krishna consciousness, you're meant to come up and stay up. What was that flyer? Stay high forever, right? Prabhupada approved of it. And if you listen to those early lectures, he's talking a lot about consciousness. The supreme consciousness, because that was consciousness raising, and super consciousness was in the air at that time. And it's still there, that's still what we're after. So no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating. And that's on the negative side. And there's so many other things, as you learn. So these austerities have one purpose and one purpose only, as Rishabdev makes very clear. It says, Tapo divyam putraka yena, by which austerities Sattvam shuddhyet. Sattvam has different meanings. This case means your existence will become purified. The whole problem is that our consciousness is covered in various degrees according to the modes of nature we've associated with, so that we don't know who we are, we don't know that there is a God, we don't know anything. All we know is the urges of the senses, and we try to make a philosophy out of that. So that purification, understanding that within each of us, this is very encouraging. We're pure souls. We have pure love of God. It's there. It's just covered. It's not something that has to be artificial to bring from outside. Lord Chaitanya famously said, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi Shobhanari Shuddha Chate Kariyahida. Again, you get the Shuddha, the purification. So here he's saying that this eternal perfection of Krishna prema, which is the highest goal of life, according to Lord Chaitanya. Sadhya kabanoi. In this instance, the word sadhya means something to be brought from outside, something that you attain that's artificial. He says it's not like that. Shobhanadi shuddha by purification, beginning with hearing and chanting. Shobhanadi, means the hearing, etc. Your consciousness becomes purified, and kadeya hidoi. It awakens naturally. It's there already. So this is very encouraging. We already have the great treasure within us. We just have to uncover it, become aware of it, and live the life of a pure devotee, ultimately. So that's exactly the same message as Rishabdev. And what's the result of that? Yena sattvam, and what is it? Shudje jasma brahmasaukyam tvanantam. By that purification, you become eligible, you become able to enjoy spiritual happiness, which doesn't end. Every material pleasure has a beginning and an end. That's why it's so frustrating, because it's dependent on material circumstances outside, the condition of your senses, right? But those are material. It means they're always changing. You can only enjoy sex so long. You can only enjoy eating so long. If you do more than that, you'll get sick. You know, Prabhupada always gives the example of the eating. We're so restricted. You eat a little bit more, you can't eat for 3 days. You know, I mean, I was thinking, why was I thinking about this? Somehow I think I saw a lecture on YouTube, Bhakti Swami. No, it wasn't Bhakti Swami. It was Suhota Swami. And way back when, this was, I don't know, early 90s, Nareshwar Prabhu, he has a place. He probably still has a place there in Mayapur. You know, he has a home. And so he invited myself, Suhota Swami, and Bhakti Vidyapurna Swami in a pizza eating contest, prasadam. So I foolishly said yes. So there we were, you know, skinny little me, skinny little Bhakti Vidyapurna Swami, and robust Suhota Swami, you know. Oh my God. So the image I get out of this finally is Suhota Swami winning the contest, lying on his back as he's eating the last the pizza. And then after the pizza there was dessert. What is that called now? It's condensed yogurt, very sweet. What is it? Yeah, maybe it was Shrikant. Anyway, there's a whole lot of it, big bowl, you know. So I thought, I ate a bunch of that. I literally couldn't eat for 3 days. I ran from prasadam. I mean, there's no question of it, you know. And Prabhupada says like that. You can't eat for 3 days. Anyway, so you have limitations. This is the whole point. Sense gratification means limited, but your desire to enjoy is unlimited. So therefore, it's always frustrating. Plus, you're doing damage to the body. You know, if you exceed the limits of the, you know. So it's always a bad bargain. And you know, the one that is most dominant in life, you know, is the sex desire. That's why we're here, right? So that has to be controlled. But the wonderful thing is that by the process of Krishna consciousness, not only the austerities, but the chanting of the holy name, the kirtan. What is this? Susukam kartam aviyam. We heard this verse. This is the second verse of the 9th chapter. Prabhupada, we have a whole book named after the beginning of the verse. Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam, Pavitram, Idamuttadam, Pratyakshapagamam Damyam, Susukam kartam aviyam. This Krishna consciousness is the king of education, Raja Vidya. It is the most confidential. It doesn't come just by being curious about something. It has to be given from above. So very confidential. And the rest of this 9th chapter is entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge. It ends with the most secret of all secret verses. Here it is. Manmana bhavaman bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vashyasi yuktvaibam atmanamat parayana. He has the same verse in the 18th chapter, a little different. Just think of me, Krishna says. become my devotee, offer your homage unto me, bow down to me, worship me, you'll certainly come to me. And then in the 18th chapter, I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. He promises to Arjuna. So we also become dear friend of Krishna. So it's an open secret. But for one to take it seriously and take it up, that requires the special mercy. One has to have the adhikari to be a fertile ground where the seed of the creeper of devotion can be planted, where your heart is open to it. When you hear about it, when you open the book, when you meet somebody who's into it, it piques some interest because of past exposure, most likely, and you want to pursue it. Or like some of us, I wasn't like Vijay. When I opened the Krishna book, it was too much. I was more of a Mayavadi, you know. I needed more philosophy. So then when I had the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, that was it. That did it for me. But Vijay, I read the Gita in how many days? A few days? Oh, the abridged. Yeah, but that's still like, 400-page book. 3 days, yeah. And Keshava Bharadwaj had a similar experience with the unabridged. He literally was reading it. So we've distributed hundreds of millions of those, and we don't have hundreds of millions of initiated devotees. But the point is, it's all auspicious. The books are out there, and sometimes they fall off a shelf and hit someone in the head, the grandson of the person who bought the book, and so they're potent. But the potency is there. Srila Prabhupada's words, his devotion, his faith, his erudition, everything comes through. And if you're receptive, it can transform your life for eternity. So this is what we're each day Prabhupada set up this Bhagavatam class. And here, this is very sobering, this whole section, as you probably noticed. Even to the point where I think in the next chapter, we're going to get to back to those prose verses. They're not actually verses. Really long description. More details on this forest of enjoyment. It's like 3 different chapters, I noticed, and it's meant to be very sobering, and this is reality. This is what I've been going through. Let me act in such a way that I don't have to suffer in this forest of enjoyment anymore. This is not real enjoyment, but we're enjoyers, and that's why at the end of his verse about austerity, he starts out with the enjoyment of the hogs. And then he says, but if you follow this principle of performing divine austerity, and in the context of Krishna consciousness, of course, you'll become eligible to enjoy spiritual happiness, which is unlimited and which doesn't end. Right at the beginning of Nectar of Devotion, you get the intelligence of Rupa Goswami coming and how he presents this Nectar of Devotion. He has these, was it 8? I think 8 different benefits of the Krishna consciousness. It completely ends your suffering in the material world, and you will become able to enjoy unlimited happiness. He compares the different kinds of pleasure. Sense pleasure is like a little drop compared to the ocean of Brahmananda, of getting completely free from all attachments here and being situated in the Brahman effulgence, you see. But that happiness of the Brahman effulgence is like a drop compared to the Premananda. So just try to imagine the kind of things. And if you can't imagine, then read the Anjalila of the CC. We've been given the books of Srila Prabhupada showing the what's going on in the highest happiness. Lord Nityananda, what does his name mean? Bhakta Saul, do you know what his name means? Nitya Ananda. You can figure it out. Eternally? Okay. He understands. Eternally full of bliss. Eternally blissful. Isn't that the way we want to be? He's giving us the opportunity to join in, the party, the Sankirtan party. So we get a little taste of that on the holidays. I don't know about you, but yes, Nityananda's appearance day is my favorite holiday. I mean, Lord Chaitanya's appearance, Janmashtami, they're all great. But somehow, the whole pastimes of Lord Nityananda, who he is, the Jagai Madai, the Kirtans, it just impresses me more than any. It just reaches me. And that's what reality is. This is, the moping around in the material world, lamenting she left me, or she's lamenting he left me, all of this. That's not who we're meant to be. Krishna is always there with us. He's always available. If we call on him, if we surrender, that's the whole idea. You know, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 50 years now. Vijay is about the same. And I'm really, you know, the holy name, the chanting, the service, it's the same pleasure is there, or more pleasure than before. It's all a question of just my consciousness. But as far as material pleasures, oh my God, you know, I'm old now. They know from on the internet when you buy something, okay, this guy's old. So they'll send me those kind of email messages, you know. So much as, oh, how can you revive your sex life, you know? There's so much of that. Right, you know, delete. Or, you know, all kinds of things like that, you know. Are you having trouble doing this? You know, this is how you can do, you know, your knees are hurting you, right? Luckily, no, not yet anyway. But the point is, yeah, the body's going to, you know, do what it's going to do. You have two choices. You can die prematurely, or you can get old and die eventually. You know, take your choice. You know. What do you mean? That's yeah, and you can try to forget it. The sense gratification is a way of forgetting that you're dying, that you're dying at every moment. It's Maya's trick to make you forget your actual situation in the human body. And then you read about this one and that one, you know, some disaster over here. Boy, I'm glad, you know, here we are in San Diego. This didn't happen here, you know. Until it happens right here where you are. Something happens. You know, a tsunami happens, or the earthquake. I tell this story. Many of you weren't here when I told it several times. When I first came here, I was coming from Miami. Vijay, I had a great opportunity to have his association for 6 years in Miami in the 80s, working on the Bhagavatam, this Bhagavatam. And so that was all. The big danger there was the hurricanes. Still is, you know. You can't do anything about it. You can't like blow an atom bomb and stop it, you know, it doesn't work. And so all you have to do is track it. Is it coming to me? Is it happening to me? I remember when I moved here, it was that year, I think, 89, that they had the big one, right? That came and that ruined that airfield. So I called up Dharma. Yeah, I called Dharma. Dharma, it's coming right to you. He's eternally there. He's always been. He was the president or in some capacity of authority. I said, "Are you guys getting out or what?" No. We locked the windows down. I said, "Okay, great." You know, and it just deviated. It didn't really hit them head on, and they were able to get some money for what little damage from the government, so they came out ahead. You know, Krishna protect them. But it hit. What was the name of that airfield? Homeland something. There was a big Air Force field down south, even below Miami. It was like destroyed. They never opened it up again. So we were conscious of that. It's a great danger. It's an adi-daivic misery that's happening all the time. So then I moved here, drove across the country with Bhakti Leon. Anyway, that's a whole other story. It was a bit of an adi-bhautic misery for a while. He was a nice guy. He just wrote me, "Please forgive my offenses." Believe it or not, after all these years. But he was supposed to share the driving. But after I saw him drive for like 5 minutes, I said, no, he's not going to drive in a big truck, you know, one of these U-Hauls across the country. So I drove the whole way, you know. So I finally arrived here, sunny San Diego, you know, and no hurricanes, because of just the way the earth turns. They all go out toward the ocean. They sometimes hit, but not here. I said, oh, great, you know, but I heard about the earthquakes, you know. So I checked, sure enough, there's a fault real close to us, you know, and we had one here in my second year or something. There was we had different set of chandeliers, and I was upstairs. We used to have a place up there you could chant. I was chanting my rounds, and suddenly the whole building is moving like this, you know. And I ran down the stairs, and you know, I was in Maya. Instead of running toward the deities, protect the deities, I ran out the door. That's the way it was, probably. And the sidewalk was doing the same thing, you know. Uh-oh. But it quieted down after like half a minute or something, you know. It wasn't as. But suddenly you realize you're completely helpless. What can you do about that? So that's the nature of the material world. you think you're enjoying, you've got it together, you got, everything. And if of course, there's always old age, and that's coming. But even the height of youth, these dangers, these miseries are there, which completely puts a lie to all your attempts to enjoy. So the first thing you learn in Krishna consciousness, if you're serious, no, you got to control the lower self by the higher self. Krishna says that. Tasmat fandanyanyado niyam yabadatarshaba. Last part of the 3rd chapter, very instructive. It's the lust section. Very appropriate. So he says, after describing how this lust is never satisfied, it burns like fire, it's your eternal enemy, he says, therefore, in the beginning you have to control your senses by this higher intelligence. Indriyanyando niyamya bhadatarshapa papmanam pratihiyanam jnana vijnananashanam. And conquer over this enemy which destroys your knowledge and realization. So that's the whole problem, is that as soon as you get into sense gratification, then your knowledge is covered. And unfortunately, it also happens to devotees. Because until we're actually on the platform of nishta, at least, which is quite pure, anartha nivritti. You read the famous verses by Rupa Goswami, the ladder from faith to prema. Right in the middle there is nishta. It means quite pure. You're in danger. You're in severe danger of falling back into the sense gratification. And that's why association is so important, the discipline is so important, the books, all of it the Prabhupada gave us is to help us to sustain our determination and to make advancement in detachment and knowledge, vairagya vidya. And it comes through, the great advantage that devotees have over the impersonal yogis, the ascetics, the tapasvis, the mayavadis, any other elevation principle, is that Krishna gives you the higher taste, like right at the beginning. The chanting of the holy name is so powerful, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra especially, that if you get into a nice kirtan, you may be performing so many, have just come from so much nonsense, At least your brain has to be in decent shape. But, and you get in a kirtan, you can feel something. There's some joy there, there's some difference, And so that gives you a taste, a little taste, which, if you're fortunate, will lead you to investigate the process more. Because you have to have the philosophy in order to be sustained. You have to know what you're doing. Because there are going to be dry periods, the periods where you're not able to enjoy. You just did some nonsense. You have to bring it back. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. I always like to, several verses I'm recalling recently. This one I've shared before. But Uddhava, he's in the position of Arjuna in the 11th canto. He's listening to Krishna give his instructions. And he's as they often do, Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers, and all of the great writers of these songs, they take a position of a conditioned soul. And then they write, a very moving prayer, and they call out to Krishna helplessly, please save me. As a model for what we should do. They're already on the highest level. So Uddhava is saying, it says, Dashtam janam sampatitam bilesmin, kalahena chuddu sukora tarsham, samudharayanam kripayapavarga vachobirasincha mahanubhava. So Mahanubhava, he's saying, oh, great Lord, Krishna, he recognizes as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he says, I've fallen into this material world, which is like a big hole where a snake lives. And what's that snake? The snake of time. Poisonous. Kalahina. I'm bitten. I've been bitten by this snake of time, this poisonous snake. And yet, even though that's happening, Chuddha Sukota Tarsham. I have great thirst, Uru Tarsham, for insignificant sense gratification. So this is the character of materialists, right? He's taking that role. Even though they're suffering, and people they know are suffering, it's all over the place, still, all they know to relieve it is some kind of sense gratification. Some drug, intoxication, or whatever it may be. It can all be a drug. The Super Bowl, part of the whole TV. That's its total addiction. It can be a total addiction. right? Just take your mind away, you know. Now they have the virtual reality, you know. And forget, you know, that I'm dying. I've got to leave this. It's crazy. It's madness. It really is madness. So he's saying, what's the solution? He said, Samudharainam, please pull me out of this hole by sprinkling upon me your wonderful words of wisdom, which give liberation. Vachobharasincha Mahanabhava, O great Lord. And Rupa Goswami has a similar verse. I remembered this last night. I was speaking to our old friend Chris. Met him here. So nice to see him. Manasajapani dushte, labdapatos mi dushte, timandagahanadupe, handa sangsara kupe, ajatanakaladaksha heta mundara daksha mupanayamamahaste bhakti rajum namaste. Bhakti Saul, you can learn that one? I'll help you. Okay. He said yes in front of the deities. I'm holding it. So he says, fallen in this deep and dark and dirty well of Maya, threatened by the snake of lust, whose venom burns like fire. Helplessly I pray, O Lord, whose strength is near in doubt. Place the rope of bhakti in my hand and pull me out. Now, there's so much in this verse, you know. Manasijja Pandit just say, get back to lust. We're right back to the verse. Manasijja means born of the mind, mind born. You know, it's like a snake. Bites you and makes you crazy. So Manasijja Pandit just say, I've fallen into this material world, which is like a snake hole, and here is this snake of lust ready to bite me. So in this dangerous situation, I'm praying, O Ajita, the strength is never in doubt, unconquerable Lord. Please place the rope, Bhakti Rajum, Bhakti is the rope of Bhakti in my hands and pull me out. And as Maharaj would like to say, what do we have to do? Hold on to the rope. That's all we have to do. That's our sadhana. That's our serious sadhana bhakti. By strictly following that, then Krishna will pull us out. He will deliver us. He's the one who's delivering us. He sees our sincerity and gives us more taste for the holy name. You know, the more taste you have for the holy name and all the process of devotional service, all of this lust and this material desire will fade away. You know, Maya won't have releases you. That's the whole import of the verse. Daivi yesha gunamahi mama maya doratyaya. This world of my Maya, composed of the three modes of nature, is impossible to overcome on your own efforts. But those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond it. And surrender means following the sadhana bhakti, getting up early, coming on time, doing all the things, refining, improving your sadhana, so that your mind is in a state where you can better concentrate on Krishna and a holy name and everything. And you're actually progressing and becoming purified. Quicker, the whole thing is the speed. We're all on the path now. Krishna says, you know, there's no loss or diminution. The whole question is how fast we're going to go. How determined we are to give up the impediments, to be, you know, to pray, to be able to overcome the impediments, things we're still hanging on to, so that we can enter into the, as Prabhupada says in one purport, into the dancing party of Krishna. Okay, it's kind of late. I kind of went on and on. Any questions, comments? All right. He's had his hand up first. Bhakta Alex. Oh, you're closer to the mic. Okay, it's very kind of you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol.
When Balram Prabhu was giving class, he was talking about how materialists make mundane things divine.
Yeah.
And I feel amongst at least my personal practice, like after some years of practice of Krishna consciousness, we can make the divine mundane. And it seems like it's because I'm superimposing my material desires on spiritual things. I love eating good food. I was eating that outside. Then I found prasadam. So now I come here for good food. I want good music. Before I used to listen outside. Now I come here for kirtan, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, that is not satisfying in the long run when we superimpose these material desires on spiritual objects and we make divine things mundane. So how are we going to cross that barrier? Because it seems like I see myself and a few friends, we just get stuck at this point, just trying to search for material things and spiritual.
Okay, thank you, Puru. First of all, this is the nature of my service. You know, I'm a word guy. So Prabhupada said we make mundane things divine. But the make is not proper. You don't really make them divine. And I don't think he meant that. You see them as divine. You equate them with what is really divine, because you don't really understand. And the same thing is true for us. We can't, the deities are divine, but we can enter into mentality that, you know, they're statues. You know, we're not going to say that, and we wouldn't, it may not even be conscious, but we may deal with them as statues. That's why, you know, I say, and you know, Prabhupada wanted this. What the pujaris all know. What are the two main requisites for being a good pujari? Punctuality. Cleanliness and punctuality. You know, now it's easy to fall away from that. Not completely, but, you know, cut corners here and there, come late every now and then. And so, where is our deity worship? Well, most of us are not getting on the altar. But our deity worship is attending the programs and being on time. Like I made this, the idea is the deities are the deities. They're deities. They're divine. You know, even though they may have been carved from marble, because of the worship, because of the installation, because of all of this, Krishna is there. He can bless us as the deity, and Prabhupada would say sometimes the deity speaks to him. Certainly spoke to Prabhupada, you know. Or that story, who was it, Raghunath Mukunda, the child, you know, and his father went away and said, okay, so make sure the offering is done, and that the deity takes the prasadam. So he made the offering, the child, and he peeked in, and the food is still there. He thought, oh, something is wrong. Why haven't you taken the prasad, oh Krishna, you know? So he saw the sincerity of the boy, so he actually ate the prasad, the deity. Just like, you know, Shirachora Gopinath, Shakshi Gopal, sometimes they're actually, you know. So the point is that Krishna's there, and according to our faith and our purity, we can interact with the deity in that way. So that's the way we should see. And even if we're not seeing that way, we should act that way. As soon as we start coming late and later, you know, and so forth, then it means that we're not seeing the deity as there. If I told you, today is a special day. Radha and Giridhari are actually going to be on the altar, and they're going to come down and join in the kirtan. Would someone be late? Oh, you know, I didn't get to bed last night. And, you know, I mean, when the curtain's open, wouldn't everyone be... Maybe Krishna will peek out before the curtain. The whole idea is that as you mentioned, we can go either way. You know, when you say people make the mundane things divine, the point is that they deify some sports star or music star or politician. They don't they revere them. They worship them in the way we do. They chant their glories. They make sacrifices of money. They go to see them. That's what we do. But so that's a kind of worship. But they're always disappointed. The politicians definitely disappoint them. The sports stars, you know, lose the Super Bowl, or they break their leg or something. It's just fallibility. So on the other side, as you say, we can become stale in our practice if we're not careful. And that's why we need to know the offenses. How can we and really always go toward good association. Sometimes it's very painful. Is that this is one of the symptoms of someone who's having a hard time. He's not comfortable being amongst devotees, because the devotees remind him of how he, used to be strict, but now he's not anymore. And this happens all the time. So it's a struggle. And I read again these verses by Rupa Goswami. We're going through the anartha nivritti stage. You come in association. You become attracted. You want to practice. Start chanting. You're feeling the benefits. Then you want to get initiated. That was such a moving initiation. This lady, I had no idea. She was so sincere. But by the force of time, and if we're not careful, then our determination can wane and so forth. So therefore, to maintain our sense of seeing things as that are really sacred as sacred, and respecting them as such, rather than making them mundane or seeing them as mundane. The nectar of instruction. You know, what is the thing that is damaging? Atyahara priyasacha bhajabo niyamagraha janasangastalawinsa should be bhakti pranashati. Pranashati means can completely destroy. So if you engage into too much overeating, over collecting of things, you know, it's a sign of lack of faith and loss of control. And endeavoring for mundane things, nonsense talk. I mean, this is, I don't want to go on, it's getting late. But so much of that in the Bhagavatam. Next time you remind me, I'll tell you this one verse that just blew my mind when I read it. It's in the 9th chapter, 3rd canto, Lord Brahma speaks. Huh? I better say it now, okay. Who goes to Vaikuntha? He says, who goes and who doesn't get to go? Yanna brajantaka badora chanana vara chindvandiyeni vishayako katamatigna. Yastu shuta hatabagaya nibadata sadas tang tang chapantishaneshu tamaksuhanta. Yan navajanti, he who doesn't go, but navajanti to Vaikuntha. They listen to topic, they listen to and nowadays you see, you know, which had nothing to do with Krishna. Rachananavarat means agabidho, he who destroys sin. That's the name for Krishna. A creation of words. In other words, literary words or spoken words, which have nothing to do with Krishna. You're listening to that, you're absorbed. Shinvante anya vishaya kukata is known as kukata, not Krishna kata. It means bad talks. What's the result? Matigni, destructive of your intelligence. You know, what's the result? Yastu shuta, hearing that, hata bagaya, you lose all your good fortune. Atasadas, your interest in spiritual matters wanes and disappears, is stolen away. Atasadas, and tang tang chapanti, those topics themselves throw you down. Chapantya, ashadaneshu, where there's no shelter. Tamaksu, into darkness. Last word is hanta, alas. The Brahma is speaking. It all depends on what we hear, on what we absorb our mind in. So that's a great danger. The ether, everything is saturated with all of this mayic sound vibration. So we have to learn how to ourselves produce transcendental sound that we can hear, and meet with others who do it. Listen, we have the opportunity. In other words, keep our hearing and meditating, you know, very pure. So that, and then the other aspects, I'm not going to just refer to that book, Upadeshamrita. That book is meant for sadhakas. You know, it's very concise and very wonderful, and Prabhupada gave it to us with wonderful purpose. On that note, if I don't ask him. Oh yes, Prabhu. No, we have to end soon, so if you could.
So.
Yes, Alex.
So, you were saying that, you know, like the holy name is very powerful in itself, and kind of to his point, you know, Prabhupada says that even hearing, like, you know, the mantra from somebody who's, you know, like a sahaja or something, it's like, you know, drinking milk that's been touched by the lips of a serpent.
Sanatana Goswami said, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and you can like chant Hare Krishna for thousands of lifetimes and still make like no advancement, because it's not like there's no sincerity. So sometimes, like, I'm gonna drive back to Arizona, you know, pretty soon, and I listen to kirtans, but some are like pretty interesting from, you know, people when they're talking about Krishna, you know, it's kirtan, but you know, and I think about Krishna when I'm hearing them, but you know, these people are obviously, you know, they're not so sincere, but they, you know, they like singing kirtans. So the first question, I guess, is that, you know, is that negative for my consciousness to hear these kind of kirtans? Is that bad for me? And then also to his point, so I really like to eat prasadam, and like, so I eat even after I'm full, and I eat, you know, or I'll eat something just because it tastes, I love the way it tastes. So it's kind of like sense gratification.
Yeah.
Right? So at what point, like you're saying, or dancing, you know, and, you know, I love to dance for the deities and everything, and that could also be sense gratification. So at what point does it actually become sense gratification, and is it not purifying?
Well, first of all, the part about the kirtan, you know, the thing is, it's not, you're here, so it obviously didn't poison you completely, you know. So and what I would suggest, there are so many wonderful, you know, recordings. I have a CD that I've left in my car for like 4 years. You know, when I'm in there, that's all I listen to. You know, it's a series of kirtans at the Festival of Inspiration in New Vrindavan some years ago. You know, they had a kirtan section. The whole day would just be the kirtan, and wonderful kirtans. I just like listening to them. So, I mean, you could remove the ones that are. I mean, it's poison. But the point is, you'll never get love of God by listening to those kirtans, because there's something missing in the voice. But it can still be attractive, and you can be chanting along. So you know, but the point is, it's not as wholesome, and it's dangerous if you just get attracted to that kind of kirtan. But there's enough wonderful kirtaniyas, you know, I could give you on that aspect. As far as overeating, that's classic. I mean, you wouldn't believe, you know, every Sunday they would cook the feast, and all of the you know, it's a small house, and you'd smell it be all day, you know. And I for years I was a total addict of halva and ladus. Even though we had so many guests, they wouldn't take all their halva or all their ladus, you know, and I would collect them and eat them all, you know. And then I would lie back in my bunk, and I said, never again, never again, never again. Till next week. It went on for years like that. But I still wanted to do my duty. I was still jumping up and down, you know. So Prabhupada provided that. He would even tell Stanley to take more. He had 10 chapatis until he had 12. He probably wouldn't let him go, you know. So that secret weapon. Because the thing is, he knows you're coming from this world of sense gratification. Okay, let it all be concentrated on prasadam, and then they'll be too, you know, wiped out to try to enjoy anything. So, but that a certain point, it has to come under control, because it'll be a blockage, you know. Anyway, we can discuss it later. I have to go. All the glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.